Thanks for reminding me. Make sure you hydrate, everybody. This is the real hydration, spiritual knowledge. So I woke up at 1 o'clock this morning in anxiety. What am I going to talk about? I had, earlier in the week, I had thought about something, and then I thought, no, that's not relevant. So that I rework something, and then I said, no, that's not good. Now I'm getting too splayed out. So at 1 o'clock this morning, I was sitting at my computer, and I thought, okay, what's relevant? And I just typed in, what are the world's greatest problems of today? And it came up to United Nations website. And very interestingly, the first purpose in these 7 purposes of ISKCON, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, is very similar to well, at least the description. I don't know if it's the mission statement of the United Nations, but so anyways, I just wanted to open up by saying ISKCON is primarily an educational institution, because the 7 purposes, or you could say the mission statement of ISKCON, is given by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. Talk about 5 of them are talking about teaching, and 2 of them are supportive of that teaching. So the very first one, I'm not going to read all 7. The first one is to systematically propagate spiritual knowledge to society at large, and to educate all people in the techniques of spiritual life in order to check the imbalance of values in life and to achieve real unity and peace in the world. So here's a little blurb from the United Nations website. It sounds almost exactly the same. The United Nations was established after World War II in an attempt to maintain international peace and security, and to achieve cooperation among nations on economic, social, and humanitarian problems. Another little blurb they had, it was sort of leaning in the direction of transcending national boundaries. So how's that working for you? You look at the world situation today. So I wanted to open up also with a verse from the Ishopanishad, which is an important text or series of verses. And this is the first mantra. Isavasyam dam sarvam yat kincha jagatam jagat tena tyaktena bunjita magdida kasya svidhanam. Everything animate or inanimate that is within the universe is controlled and owned by the Lord. One should therefore accept only those things necessary for himself which are set aside as his quota, and should not accept other things, knowing well to whom they belong. And I just want to read a short excerpt from the commentary of Srila Prabhupada in reference to, it's an election year, unfortunately. And, we're besieged with political posturing and so on. And this whole, it's been going on for quite a while, but now it's reached this fever pitch of polarization. We're a polarized nation. Okay, so Prabhupada writes, in modern society, there is always a great quarrel between the laborers and the capitalists. This quarrel has taken an international shape, and the world is in danger. Men face one another in enmity and snarl, just like cats and dogs. Sri Upanishad cannot give advice to the cats and dogs, but it can deliver the message of Godhead to man through the bona fide acharyas, the holy teachers. The human race should take the Vedic wisdom of Sri Upanishad and not quarrel over material possessions. One must be satisfied with whatever privileges are given to him by the mercy of the Lord. There can be no peace if the communists or capitalists or any other party claims proprietorship over the resources of nature which are entirely the property of the Lord. The capitalists cannot curb the communists simply by political maneuvering, nor can the communists defeat the capitalists simply by fighting for stolen bread. If they do not recognize the proprietorship of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, all the property they claim to be their own is stolen. So there's a little example, you got a gang of thieves that robs a bank, and then they come back to the, what do you call it, the hideout, and they say, okay, now let's divide it fairly. So that's similar thing, how can you claim proprietorship? We come into this world with nothing, we leave with nothing. Meanwhile, in that short, whatever span of life we have, we stake our claim, beginning with the body. This is my body. Hands off my body. They're protesting forever. And then by extension, things connected to my body. Prabhupada calls it extended selfishness. First, our misidentification with the material body to be ourselves, and then things in relationship to our body, our family. And by extension, our community, our nation, so on. But the sentiment, there's a sentiment there that's spiritual, but it's just misinformed. So in the Bhagavad Gita, in the chapter 7, there's a verse that talks about those who are in knowledge recognizing God's proprietorship as the cause of all causes, the supreme proprietor. They surrender, and it's a very rare person that does that. So in one sense, it's a little bit of a, swimming upstream. The current is, especially in, capitalism, it's, individual proprietorship as opposed to state. But Prabhupada actually called it spiritual communism. But communism is sort of like a, what do you call it? Not a red flag, but, Red Scare. In the early 20th century, there was a Red Scare after World War I, and then there was a second Red Scare after World War II, courtesy of Joseph McCarthy and company, where people were blacklisted for their suspected communist ties. And was it Lee Harvey Oswald went to Russia, and there was a whole thing about, the assassination of Kennedy. Was it communism? So there was a lot of, so you just say communism a little bit, people, get a little upset with that. But also in the Upanishad, it said that someone in the spiritual path, they should cultivate knowledge of transcendence along with knowledge of this material world. I mean, it's called nescience, darkness, but we do live in the world, and we have to navigate. And in that verse that I mentioned in the 7th chapter, Prabhupada writes that in the beginning of spiritual realization, while one is trying to give up one's attachment to materialism, there is some leaning towards impersonalism. When one is further advanced, he can understand that there are activities in the spiritual life, and that these activities constitute devotional service. So in the Bhagavad Gita, when Arjuna balks at his duty, he wants to go off and be a renunciate. And Krishna's like, not going to work. By nature, you're a kshatriya, you're a warrior, and you can't shirk your duty. And throughout the Gita, this is actually, it's recommended, rather than trying to step away from society, to find your place in society and engage in your natural propensity of work as an offering to God, or karma yoga. And as opposed to trying to step away from society, like in classical, you could say renunciation, the yogis go off to a cave, or the Christian mystics, the desert fathers, where they live a very secluded life. And So that's not the general path for majority of people. It's engaging in the world. And there's always going to be a need, or there is a space in society for renunciates or monks or, very dedicated spiritual practitioners. But again, that's a very small minority of society. And along these lines, I wanted to read an excerpt from a letter that Srila Prabhupada wrote. Now, here we were talking about world peace, and if we don't see God in the center, if we don't see God as the proprietor, there's always going to be this conflict. So even within our own society, our International Society for Krishna Consciousness, we see there's conflict. So what's up with that? I thought we're promoting peace and unity, but so I wanted to give a little summary that I heard from a very interesting presentation by Chaitanya Charan. He's a very learned devotee. But first, I wanted to read this short paragraph, Prabhupada speaking about unity and diversity. This is well known by many of our members, but it's always good to refresh our memory. Material nature means dissension and disagreement, especially in this Kali Yuga, in the age that we live in. But for this Krishna consciousness movement, its success will depend on agreement, even though there are varieties of engagements. In the material world, there are varieties, but there is no agreement. In the spiritual world, there are varieties, but there is agreement. That is the difference. The materialist, without being able to adjust the varieties and the disagreements, makes everything zero. They cannot come into agreement with varieties. But if we keep Krishna in the center, then there will be agreement in varieties. This is called unity and diversity, or in the language of the Vedas, achintya bheda bheda tattva, simultaneously one and different. So now this is I don't claim to be any sort of political in the know. This is just a very, very brief overview of, because we are, as I said, we can't distance ourselves from society. And one scholar, devotee, Radhika Raman, said he feels that where we're really going to transform society is when we come to the table in whatever vocation we are and excel on a very professional level. People will respect you and you have a seat at the table. They'll want to hear from you if they see your character, not so much you're just from the outside preaching, you need to change the way, you're living the wrong way. No, we have to teach by example. It's much more powerful. But again, there's a role for the renunciates, for the priestly teachers, but that's a very small part of society. How are we going to impact the world in a very, very significant way? That was just his opinion of that when we look upon our work as worship, it is part of our devotion to God to become expert in whatever field that we are drawn to, and to have a seat at the table, as he said, that people will see you're living a life of devotion. You're working and you're living a life of devotion, or you have exceptional character. Because that's, examples better than precept, as I say. So this is just a real brief overview. And I just thought it was very helpful for me, because right now, there's, maybe I'll just start out by saying in modern, I don't know what you want to call it, political analysis, they are conflating what's called leftist and liberalism. They're two different things. So with that in mind, first I'll begin. He said that because these are sort of people, natural human psychology is that we have worldviews, and within our International Society for Krishna Consciousness, there are individuals who have different worldviews. They're kind of hardwired differently, or the nature nurture thing that, you know, your upbringing, your family, the community, we have, as Carl Jung says, we have the unconscious mind. There's a programming that we have that we're not even be very aware of, actually, but it's moving us in a particular direction, or giving us a certain worldview that we're not even consciously aware of, but it's like a filter. We're filtering, we're processing the world in different ways according to the conditioning that we have. So in Chaitanya Charan's brief analysis, he said conservatism. One of the core values of conservatism is hierarchy, because they see that society, you need structure, you need people to have defined roles so that things can operate smoothly. And one of the pros of that is that it encourages a sense of duty, a responsibility. What is my role in society? And so that, and again, Arjuna was shirking his duty. He wanted to step away from his duty. And Krishna was saying, no. So duty is a good thing. Duty comes from a Latin word that actually means debt. We have a debt. We just, like my ability to speak right now is because somebody took the time to teach me how to speak. Like the very fact that I can speak, hopefully in a reasonable, rational way, is because somebody took the time to teach me. So I have a debt. I have a debt. Your parents, they raise us, they sacrifice. And even if your parents are kooky, hopefully they took care of you, at least your material needs. So there's a debt there. And so this sense of duty, this is a strong theme in the Bhagavad Gita, where, Krishna says that he sent forth generations of men and demigods and blessed them by saying, be thou happy by this yajna, this sacrifice. And he calls it a chakra, this cycle of yajna it's all about, what's that $64,000 word? Reciprocity. You never remember that. That we have a debt. We have to give back. So in a mature level, it's ultimately giving back to God. But at least initially, even if you want to be an enjoyer of this world, then you have to recognize that there's hierarchy. There are higher beings that we need to appease in order to have the material necessities that we require. We have to give back. So that's a pro. It encourages duty to have this emphasis on hierarchy. But what's the con? Tyranny, exploitation, abuse, discrimination, especially like in the bastardization of this divine order that's given in the Bhagavad Gita. The Varnashram system is the caste system where you're stuck in a particular social rank or role, and you can't move out of that. So, and then in Europe they had the feudal system, the whatever you call them, the lords and then the peasants, and so this class distinction, can lead to exploitation and discrimination. But what's the reaction to that? Okay, we'll go to the other side, the leftist side. Usually conservatives are considered right-wing. So the leftists, it's often a reaction to the exploitation of the overemphasis on hierarchy. So it's not that hierarchy is bad, but when it becomes an absolute value, then it becomes bad. The absolute value is that God is the proprietor of everything, and to develop our relationship with God, our love for God, that's the real most important value. And if hierarchy is helping us in that, then we can accept. But when we use hierarchy to exploit others, when we don't see everyone as children of God, that, they're just resources, human resources that we can manipulate. So the leftists, the pro is, or one of their core, values is equality. They see this exploitation of these, different rankings, a hierarchy. So like, okay, no ranking, everybody's equal. And on the extreme, it would be like communism, where classless society, but it's like a pendulum just swinging. Okay, the hierarchy being exploitive. Now let's swing way over to this other side where everybody's equal, but and because there's a spiritual sentiment, we are all equal on a spiritual platform, but on a material platform, we're not all equal. Talents are differently distributed. You wouldn't have gold medal winners at the Olympics if everybody was equal. We have different levels of intelligence. We have different levels of, say, musicianship, or, you may like music, but you may not have the skill set to be a professional musician. It doesn't mean you can't entertain yourself, but if you sing like a wounded cat, that may not be your role in society, is to be a musician. So what the con is of that extreme sort of left is that you get people who are incompetent in positions, so there's a pro, but there's a con. So what I'd like to try to do is just like Krishna consciousness, we're going to synthesize, we're going to take the good. We do need to have a political structure in society, but let's, not be at each other's throats because of the exploitation, but okay, what's the good? What's the good? So lastly, the liberal. Now, again, this was quite enlightening for me, because in political commentary today, they really kind of merged the two, the leftist liberals. But there's a difference. Liberals, one of their core value is autonomy or independence. You should be allowed to do what you want to do. And that's reasonable. Again, it's sort of countering this idea, you're fixed in a role, you have to stay in that position. No, I want to do something else. Generally speaking, people have natures but just because you were born in the family of a doctor doesn't mean you're a doctor. You might not have the aptitude. You may have an advantage because you're around whatever, dad takes you to work day or whatever, and you go and you get exposed and maybe you get some curiosity, but it's not a given. So that autonomy or that independence, the pro of that is it can give you incentive. I want to express my individuality in ISKCON Silicon Valley, Vaisheshika Prabhu, the acronym ISV, ISKCON Silicon Valley, is individual, spontaneous, and voluntary. We don't want to squash people's individuality. So now the con is chaos. Everybody just does what they want to do. There's no rhyme or reason. Okay, we're going to cook. We cook a big feast to serve out to everybody. Everybody just cooks whatever they want, and you have 5 dessert preparations and 1 salty preparation. Okay, so there could be chaos if there's not some order. It can't just be do whatever you want to do all the time. There's scope for individuality. So if we can synthesize, if we can harmonize, and what Prabhupada was talking about, unity and diversity, there's an agreement, but in that serving God is where we agree, but how we serve God, we may need to find a certain community or sangha or association that we gel with. And it doesn't mean, everybody's got, as Jivananda Prabhu always says, cookie cutter Krishna consciousness. Everybody's got to do it this way, So those are 2 thoughts. I'm going to stop in case there's a burning comment or question that anybody has. Yes, Ram Nam Prabhu. Oh, before we forget, any first-time attendees here? We have a gift for you if you're a first-timer. Right in the front row here. Oh, we got 2 or 3. Oh, we got 4. Keep your hand up and he'll give you it. Ramnam, you had a comment or question?
How does karma affect the quality?
How does karma affect your quality? Well, they're actually 2 distinct things, guna and karma. Guna is quality and karma is like your skill set. So when Krishna talks about the varnashram divisions are based on guna and karma, they're not based on birth. So guna would be the modes of nature. So your karma, your destiny may have you born in a particular situation that is compatible with your condition, because our life is a continuum. The subtle body, the mind, the intelligence and ego is what's carrying the soul from one body to another. So there is some conditioning that we're carrying from a previous life, and the birth that we have is in a what's the word? In a healthy society, generally you will flourish in your position that you take birth in, but it's not a given. There's exceptions, but typically, just like when there's careful, you could say genetic engineering, breeding, just like when you breed, animals, you want to purebred animals. So the mother and father, what do you call it, the male and female dog, they come from a bloodline, and like the great kings, like especially like in Europe, it was always like, you want to have this bloodline. You don't want to. So there is something to our karma, but it's not an absolute. It's not a given. There's exceptions, but and today in today's society, because there's not so much careful genetic engineering, it's sort of like, I was born in the backseat of a Greyhound bus. Wasn't that, what's his name? Dickie Betts. Lord, I was born a rambling man. I was born in the backseat of a Greyhound bus. So that's not, then it's like it's a wild card. Your guna and your karma is all screwed up. It's called varna sankara. It's mixed. Things are chaotic. Is that all right? Anything else? It's exactly 6:30. Wow. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.